Tonight is all about judging and protests. And if you don't know who I am, I know there's a few people from other districts. I am Chris Hulse. I am the program quality director for District 38 for this Toastmasters year. And Rhonda Young, our district director, spoke real briefly. And also here tonight is Ari Valero, and he is our district contest advisor. And he had actually done our first two sessions, which were on contest rules and contest procedures on the 12th and the 19th. And so he is here tonight helping me out if there are any questions that show up in chats or or even if there's something that may have slipped my mind. And I know Ari is an expert in everything with speech contests at this point. And so if you actually were not able to make it to our first two sessions, luckily enough, they were recorded as this one is being recorded, and they're available at our district YouTube channel. And there's really two ways to get there. You can either go through our district website, which is tmdistrict38.org, and there is a blurb a little bit down on the first page where it'll link you directly to where the videos reside. Or you can go right to YouTube and just search on District 38 Toastmasters, and those videos are there. Okay. So just to give a little bit of an introduction, some of these are some repeats from what Ari had in his slides, but I figured they were good to kind of give context, especially if you know, this is your first session, you're joining us. You know, why do we have contests here in Toastmasters? I know most people are here to get over their anxiety or get better at public speaking, but these contests, there are an important part of Toastmasters, and not only do they give an opportunity to, you know, get more of that much needed speaking experience. You know, if you've never been through a contest season, you really are going to see the best of the best, and hopefully that will want to cause you to elevate your own Toastmasters abilities. Okay, so what we discuss here tonight really is for the first four levels, and for most people it's really kind of what most people are aware of in terms of the contest starting at the club level and then going to area, division, and then district. And we are basically the things we're going to talk about too cover the different types of contest, and those are the most well-known being international, and also humorous, table topics, tall tales, and evaluation. And I'm not going to really talk about the different types. What I mean is that the things I talk about pretty much cover all five types. There's one point where I'll describe how evaluation is a little bit different, but other than that, everything we talk about are going to cover all these different levels and all these different types. So before we go any further, I did want to bring something to your attention. And those of you that may have judged a Toastmasters contest, hopefully recognize what this is. And this is the Judges Code of Ethics. And this Code of Ethics is pretty important because it's not only on the judge's eligibility form that you sign and turn in when you are a judge, it's also on the back of the guide and the ballot that you fill out as a judge. So that's how important these things are. I'm not going to read all the way through them, but I just want to call out that basically what Toastmasters wants to make sure that you're upholding is objectivity, that you're avoiding any bias that, you know, has to do with where the contestant is residing in their club, the area, the division, the district. Also, their, well, I actually thought that said religious affiliation, and I noticed it said region. I was like, that's odd that it's in that sentence, but also having to do with region. But that is also part of the next part. You know, you really shouldn't hold against any contestant, their age, their sex, their race, creed, national origin, none of that stuff. Um, it might sound obvious, but again, it's one of those things that just want to hold you to a higher standard. Also, as a judge, you don't have to worry about timing the speech. There's already somebody taking care of that for you, and so actually don't time the speech because you're not supposed to consider that when you're judging the speech. You also are going to support what happens during these speech contests. So you're not going to go around and badmouth what happened, and you're going to be privy to some inside information. It is not a good idea to take that information and then go and tell other Toastmasters in your club. Especially if you maybe weren't satisfied with what happened. This is all supposed to be confidential as a judge. Also, you are not supposed to be a member of the same club for any contestant that you're judging. And really what that feeds into is that there should be no conflict of interest. Okay. So you know what? It jumped a lot forward there. Sorry about that. I was like, what happened? Okay. So different types of judges. I just wanted to make clear again for those that maybe weren't familiar, there are 3 different types of judges that we use in our contest. There's the chief judge, and then there's call it the regular judge, and there's a tie-breaking judge. And what are the differences between them? Well, the chief judge is basically helping run the contest. They're responsible for making sure it runs smoothly and fairly. But they don't judge in the contest. They're overseeing basically the functionaries that are helping make this contest run smoothly and fairly. So because of that, they don't have to be anonymous. So what are the things they're responsible for? They help recruit judges, they conduct the briefings, they actually collect the timesheet and the ballots, they handle protests, they oversee the ballot counting, and then ultimately they provide the list of the winners. The judges, they utilize the criterion and award points which end up resulting in ranking the top 3 speakers in order of who has given the best speech at that contest on that day. It's important to realize that too. Who was given the best speech at that contest on that day. We're going to talk about some potential biases that, unfortunately, hopefully you don't ever use those biases, but that is part of what being a judge is, that you were judging the contestants at that particular contest on that particular day. And you may already know this, but a reminder, you as a judge are to remain anonymous, except for the chief judge and the ballot counter. And lots of reasons for that. But biggest one is to remain impartial. And every contest has a tie-breaking judge. They're doing the same thing as the regular judges. However, they end up ranking all the contestants because if there is a tie, there has to be a way to break them. And again, they're also anonymous to the chief judge or the ballot counter. Okay. So just like contestants have eligibility to be in that role, judges do as well. And all 3, chief judge, voting judge, and tie-breaking judge, all have to meet these criteria here. They have to be a paid member. For the club contest, it can be basically a newer member. There's not really a time requirement, but at the area, division, and district levels, you have to be a paid member for a minimum of 6 months. And then in terms of education levels, talking about Toastmasters, you have either had to have completed a minimum of the first 6 projects in the Competent Communication Manual, or you have to, and I know probably a lot of us, that doesn't even apply anymore because that was quite a few years ago. So basically you have to have completed levels 1 and level 2 in any path in Pathways. Okay. So, and I stole this exact slide. I don't even think I changed it from Ari's presentation. And I just wanted to call out that depending on the level of the contest dictates basically how many judges you're going to need. So as we have on here, basically and this actually goes beyond judges. This actually has all the judges and officials. So at the club level, you have to have a chair, chief judge, at least 5 voting judges, tie-breaking, and a tie-breaking judge. At area, you have to have an equal number of judges from each club, or a minimum of 5. At division, you have to have an equal number of judges from each area, or a minimum of 7. And then you also really have to stick to this rule where these judges cannot be from the club where one of the contestants is from, which I know that gets a little kind of complicated in who you're having volunteer for your contest, but that is an important rule that you need to abide by. And trust me, I know I've personally had to go through that. There was a contest several years ago that I was running where I basically got all my judges lined up, and then what I realized was that some of the judges were from some of the clubs where the contestants were, and I had to go back and basically start from scratch. So knowing this rule, hopefully you won't have to course correct right in the middle there. You can go into it and pull from places that you're not going to have that sort of conflict. And then at the district level, which will ultimately be my responsibility and ours responsibility, we want an equal number of judges from each division, and same rules apply to that. And then we end up having 2 ballot counters and 2 timers. Okay.
There's a question by Joyce. She's asking if the new contestants from new clubs just confirming that they don't have that requirement of having to complete level 2. That's for contestants.
If it's a new chartered club, you mean?
Yeah, from the last year.
Yep. Yeah, they're exempt from that role. Yes. So yeah, good call out. I didn't mention that here, but yes, if it's a newly chartered club, they are exempt from that role. Okay, so before we talked about the regular judges, I just wanted to touch upon what the chief judge is responsible for in a little more detail, so that even if you're not planning on being the chief judge, so you're aware. I'm all about transparency, so that you know who's responsible for what. And so first and foremost, they help recruit the judges. And one thing I had said at the first session, I just wanted to call out again, because when I was putting this together, I saw it called out and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to mention it again, because it is an important concept. Is a scenario you want to avoid is that, I guess a lot of times there's this sense of like, oh, okay, well, I'm holding a contest and you're going to be my judge. So, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, sort of thing. And it becomes like a tit for tat sort of arrangements. But, really, there is a danger in doing that, because what happens if you basically have the same pool of people judging, all these contests, is those judges end up awarding the same types of speeches to go to the next level. So really, what you want to do is you want to ensure that you have a diverse slate of judges, because it's going to it's more fair and equitable, and it's really going to provide the types of speeches out there a greater variety and interest. Okay. And then as chief judge, you're responsible for conducting the briefings. There's lots of things to go over, but two of the things I called out is, you want to go over that judging form, and we're going to take a look at that here in a few minutes. And also, again, review that code of ethics that I just went through, to remind people that, there are certain things that they need to hold to a higher standard. The chief judge is actually the one who collects the timesheets and ballots. If it's a virtual contest, the chief judge and the ballot counters go into a breakout room. If it's an in-person contest, they actually physically collect those ballots and then take them, and they go into a physically separate room from where the contest is being held. The chief judge also is the one who oversees the protest. And like I was saying at the very beginning, if you're logged on already. We're going to go into a lot of detail with that in basically the second half of this presentation. So more about protest in a few moments. And I'm going to talk a few moments about ballot counting. And, really there's a few things you just want to stay true to as if you're a chief judge or you're a ballot counter, or just I want to make you aware that this is what's supposed to be happening. Everyone who's in that room counting the ballots should be independently adding everything up. It's not like one person does it and everybody says, yeah, I agree. Yeah. You probably know basic math. I trust you. No, that because people make mistakes. There are separate people in there. Everybody should be doing their own work. Think of it like a test or a quiz, you know. But the cool thing is you get to compare answers at the very end of it to make sure you're on the same page. Because something as important of a contest, you want to make sure that everybody knows how to do math the right way. Like I have there, if somebody has different totals, everyone should go back and look at their numbers. And then ultimately, the chief judge is the one that provides the list of winners. Now, if you're the chief judge and the contest chair is announcing it, pay attention to what is being announced. Because if something's wrong, if maybe you handed the paper and you wrote them in the wrong order, or maybe the person saying it announced out of order, that has to be called out immediately. Because once the contest is closed, no changes can be made. Basically, whatever's announced is then the reality of the situation. So don't feel like, oh, I did my work, I handed my winners to the person announcing it, I'm done. No, pay attention, because again, we all can make mistakes. Okay. So I put a slide together just to again make people aware that again, that something I'm going to call out right here. If you're not paying attention, there is potential to make a mistake. So, you know, those of you who are ballot counters and chief judges, you just want to make sure that you're doing stuff the right way. So basically, um, in an in-person contest, the judges are going to tear off the bottom of that sheet, their ballots. Now, with virtual contests, this is done a little bit differently, but I know a lot of even virtual contests, the judges will still have either a fillable PDF, or they'll print out the PDF and they'll actually be making notes on the piece of paper, in front of them as they're watching things happen. So for this example, I basically did 3 ballots and a tie-breaking ballot. And what I wanted to call out here is the fact that it's a point system. So in this example, so if you look at the ballots on the left side of the screen here, John Smith is first place. He's first place. But because of that, he gets 3 points for every of these 3 ballots for every time that he got first place. And if you look at the counters tally sheet, which I have on the right side, you see these 3 judges. And again, there's usually more than 3 judges. I just wanted to keep it simple for this example. Get 3 points. And so then whoever's in second place gets 2 points. Who's ever in third place gets 1 point. And so, and you see on the tally sheet here, that's basically how I notated everything. And so if you realize what the total is there, so John Smith got 9 points, Bradley Cooper got 5 points, and Martha Jones got 4 points. So that would mean that if this was the totality of things here, John Smith would get first place, Bradley Cooper would get second place, and Martha Jones would get third place. Now, if it so happened that, say, Bradley Cooper and Martha Jones, or really any of them, got the same number of points, then that's when you would go to your tie-breaking ballots. But basically, it's and when it's virtual, a lot of this can be done electronically with Google Forms and Excel sheets and things like that. But no matter what, the concept is exactly the same. You're basically being awarded points based on where the judges end up ranking you. And as a judge, you are deciding first place, second place, third place. The tie breaking judge, however, has to rank everybody because depending on where the tie may be, you know, you have to your rank where you end up placing everybody is important to breaking that tie. Okay. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to make everybody aware of what happens in that room, that be that breakout room or that physically away room when the ballots are being counted. Okay. So now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what makes an effective judge. And
Hey,
I know, oh, go ahead, Ari.
yeah, there's a question by Kelly. So she's
Okay.
asking, the tie-breaking judge's ballot is collected at the same time as the other
Yes.
judges.
Yes. Yep. It is. Yep. Okay. So I know judges is one judging is one of those things that it's subjective, and it's hard to train someone how to be a judge. But some of the things I have in the next few slides is really, especially if you are either someone who wants to be a judge or you want to really provide people with the information in order to being comfortable being a judge. This is what it's all about. I just want to introduce some concepts, some theories, and some of the ways that Toastmasters really kind of frames things up so that overall the judges can do the best job that they can do in the contest that they are judging. And judges really, I mean, number one, you have an obligation really to four different parties here: the contestants, to Toastmasters International as a whole, because it all starts in the clubs. And then anyone that was paying attention to District 38, Jocelyn Tyson started in a club doing a speech, and she took that all the way to the world stage. And so, Toastmasters International has a vested interest in, making sure that we are judging properly and in the best of our abilities. Also, the audience, you really want to make sure the audience believes in this whole process, and then also to yourself as a judge. Okay. Also realize that there's a difference between judging and evaluating. I would imagine most of us are pretty well versed in evaluating. Maybe you're a newer Toastmaster, maybe you're still getting the hang of it, but there is a difference. So a judge selects the speaker who's given the best speech that day, but you are not, as a judge, you're not evaluating. Why? What do I mean by that? Well, evaluators, they're really more assessing a whole speech, kind of measuring the presentation, against his or her purpose. And then the big difference here is an evaluator most times is advising the speaker how they can improve. Usually tell them what they did good on, and then what they should do next time to make it better. Also, when you evaluate somebody, you basically who you're getting evaluated by. A judge, you're confidential, and you are not to explain your decision to contestants. And that works both ways. Contestants shouldn't be chasing judges out into the parking lot and being like, "Hey, why did I get second place? You got to tell me why." And some may think, "Oh, that sounds ridiculous." No, that has happened. I've heard of that happening, and that is why judges are supposed to remain confidential. You don't want that confrontation in the parking lot. Nor, as a judge, should you feel the need to go up and tell somebody, "Well, the reason why I ranked you third was that." No, mm-mm, no, because by doing that, you're really not doing your job properly. Okay, and just remember that good judges are these five things. They're accurate. You're doing the best you can, but really pay attention to what you're doing, full attention, not judging a contest and watching your neighbor's kids or cooking dinner or whatever. Now, if you're judging a contest, judge the contest. Also, we talked about during the code of ethics, be fair. Be fair. In your mind, everyone should be on the same scale. It's, and we'll talk about biases here in a second, but you shouldn't be thinking of things like, oh, you know what? Oh, I know this contestant from last year and I don't think they got a fair shake. I'm gonna give them an advantage. No. That's why I said earlier, it's you're judging that contest that day and that time. It should have nothing to do with how they did last year, or the fact that, say, if you're like have any like bias, like you're friends with them or whatever, you actually shouldn't even be judging that contest because that's going to take away from the ability to be fair. You should be trustworthy. You should be knowledgeable. That's the other thing too is, and that's part of the reason why we're doing this training is, you know, no one should ever be thrown into a judge position, especially, and I know sometimes people think, oh, well, this person over here, they finished their level two and they've been a member for 6 months. Well, I'll just make them a judge. Are they going to be a very good judge? You got to take that into consideration. And also, are they good listeners? I mean, hopefully, as Toastmasters, we're good listeners, but for this sort of thing, you got to be really on your A game. Okay. Okay. So here are some barriers to being objective. So when I was talking about biases and whatnot, these are things that could potentially lead you to make not as good of a decision as if you realize that um, sometimes these, like it says, these are barriers to you being objective. The speaker position. Now that's by random. It really, no one has control over who speaks first and who speaks last. So now, I know memory being what it is, you might have a tendency to remember the last speech more than you remember the first speech. But you really have to kind of compensate for that by paying close attention to every single contestant. It I've seen where it seems like sometimes people are at a disadvantage going first, but really, in all fairness, that shouldn't have anything to do with it. What I was saying a few moments ago about, oh, they didn't get a fair shake last time, champion for the underdog. No. Again, this is no time to be playing favoritism. Just because you feel like somebody get a fair shake, that doesn't mean that you should score them higher because of something they did last year. This is about this speech, this contest. Or maybe you just think that this particular person in the speech contest is the greatest thing since sliced bread, the halo effect. Oh, I love every time they get up and speak in their club. I don't know them, but like I've just heard great things about them. Doesn't matter. You know what? If they get up and they start having an off day and didn't deliver that speech very well, you shouldn't give them extra points just because you think, well, I feel bad for them. No. And then the reverse can be true too. If you don't like somebody or have heard bad things about them, this shouldn't reflect when you're judging or when someone's judging them in a speech contest. Not at all. Second time around. And again, that kind of goes back to some of the other stuff we were talking about. Um, make sure that you are laser focused on what they're doing today. And also, it shouldn't have anything to do with this not the norm. Um, you shouldn't feel like, oh, if I agree with them or I don't, or none of that should have anything to do with how you score them. And again, that also leads into 7, prejudice and personal preferences. Um, you want to do this from an objective point of view. And again, the last sentence there says it's almost impossible for anyone to totally be objective, but That's also why there are several judges. It's not just up to you. It is it is several people across the board making these decisions. Okay. So another thing I want to bring up is some misconceptions because, like with anything, and I know sometimes this happens to Toastmasters, you hear things. Oh, I heard that you had to do such and such to get your DTM, or oh, I heard in this club and that's really how rumors and gossip get started. So, and that happens in speech contests too. So one thing I saw in some training material was that uh, some of the things I brought up here. So a lot of people somehow believe that uh, the contests or the speeches that win, they have to be serious or they have to be motivational or they have to be inspirational. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who might coach contestants who say, oh yeah, you got to do one of these things because that tugs at the heartstrings of the audience. That may be true, but it's not a rule. I mean, a winning speech can be funny. A winning speech can be sad. I mean, there's so many factors that go into it, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But this is not as much as people might think it's part of the rule book. It's not. Really, what the contest rule state is that the speech has to be substantially original. Okay, and then same thing with props and visuals. It shouldn't be held against them or give extra points because of that. Okay. So here's what the ballot looks like. And this is, I use the International Speech Contest for this. So there's two sections to it. The top section is where people basically do their judging. And that part is called the guide. And then the bottom part is the ballot. And just so you're aware, especially if you're a judge, a ballot is only considered complete when there are names for first, second, and third place. And it's signed by the judge, and also next to it, you're supposed to write your name. And technically, as I have here, if any part of that portion is not complete, so say somebody only puts a first and second or doesn't sign it, technically the chief judge can discard it and not include it. And then it's like, well, what are you doing judging this contest if you're not going to fill it out completely? So just make sure that everything is filled out on that ballot. Okay. Now, one thing I wanted to call out too is that talking about misconceptions, people sometimes think that there is one absolute way that they have to use that guide. And actually, it's not. Because here's the thing, you are the judge. Now, just to flip back to that page a second, it gives you suggested point values and it kind of tells you, where you should land considering what's happening and whether it's content delivery, language. But as I have described on this slide, there are different ways of doing that. You can use point values. You can, as the example gives here, you can assign all the points for one section all at once. And what I mean by that is this. So under content, it's broken up by speech development, effectiveness, speech value. I've actually done it different ways. I've done it where I've given points per each section. And then sometimes I'll decide, okay, you know what? For content, that was worth let's just make this up, a 48, or under delivery, a 29 or something like that. There are different ways to do it. Again, this is a guide, but really the guide is to help you get to decide how to deem somebody first, second, and third place. So there's different ways to do it. Also, I think it talks about in number 4 about a system of pluses or minuses, depending upon things that, they heard the speaker say that they liked or didn't like. And then it gives a suggestion about, you may want to write their name in a certain way and then fold that over so you're not looking at it as you're doing a different speech. Again, not to confuse people. I know a lot of people do stick by the giving the numbers out, but I thought it was interesting how this really called out that there are different ways to do it, and as long as you are sticking to the theme of being fair and equitable across the board and not giving any bias to one person who doesn't deserve it, or would not be fair, um, there are different ways to get to that same place. Okay, so as you saw on that guide, there are 3 different categories. And this is where I'm going to call it evaluation, because evaluation is a little different. So the 3 judging categories for international table topics, humorous, and tall tales are content, delivery, and language. And depending on the type of contest, there's different percentages as to, and it calls it out on the back, I'll talk about that in a second, as to how much each seems to be worth. Content's around 50%, and then delivery and language are a little less. But I have listed here, I'm not going to read through everything, basically what is under each type of category in terms of content, delivery, and language. And you can see that here. And for those who've judged before, have probably noticed on the back of the guide and ballots, it really goes through some pretty lengthy, I think, explanations of what each of these things mean. I kind of summarize them here, and again, you'll have this presentation to go back to. And then for an evaluation contest, their categories are completely different because evaluation contest is different. The categories for evaluation are analytical quality, recommendations, technique, and summation. Okay. So that is basically everything I wanted to bring up in terms of judging, and in order to prepare people to be the best judge they can be. And like I said at the beginning, I also wanted to leave a good amount of time talking about protest, because it's just one of those things I feel that you need to be prepared for. Yes, pray that they don't happen, but you know how Murphy's Law is. Sometimes that, things happen that you might not be prepared for, but as long as you're educated towards it, you'll be good to go. So going into that, I wanted to give some context in case you weren't aware. So 25% or less of the speech can be devoted to quoting, paraphrasing, or referencing another person's context. Meaning that, for example, if you're going to talk about a song, you can definitely talk about that song during the speech, but that cannot be the brunt of what that speech is. It's got to be less than 25%. And if you're going to quote, paraphrase, or reference something, you got to cite it. And I'll talk about that. I know that can get a little fuzzy there too, but at the very end of this presentation, I have actually something I took from a frequently asked question, which we'll talk about. Contestants are also not supposed to reference another contestant or a speech referenced by another contestant during this contest they're competing in. And then also, and we'll talk a little bit about this in a few moments, all contestants and the functionaries will be advised of the speaking area before the contest begins. Okay, so protest. Very important things to know about the protest. Only a contestant or a voting judge can lodge a protest. You remember the audience and you think something went sideways? If you're not one of those 2 things, you cannot lodge protest. A protest can be filed with the chief judge or the contest chair. Chief judge has to receive all protests prior to the announcement of the winners. So if you as a judge have a beef about something that happened, once those winners are announced, too late. Sorry. And protests can only be based on 3 things. Eligibility. Good Lord, I can't say that word. Originality or reference to another contestant's speech. And I put this footnote here, that is why it is an important thing to do as a contest chair. to ensure that all contestants are eligible to compete. Especially, and I know Ari uh, referred to this in one of the earlier sessions, right around that time when we pay our renewals, basically you got to pay by the end of March. We're still in the middle of contest season. So that is like super, super important to do it then. I know for myself, I believe when I was a division director, I think for whatever reason, my division contest was on April 2nd. So yeah, it was like, oh man, I mean, something you got to do anyway. But it was even more important then because there were people that potentially were not going to be able to compete because they were no longer eligible. Okay, so what I'm going to take you through is basically step by step of what should happen when a protest basically comes up. Okay, so like I said, there's two types of protest where people who can bring it up: voting judge or contestant. So this is going to basically be the procedure for the voting judge does it, and then after this, we'll talk about contestant. It's basically the same, but it's like I said, it spells it out here in a lot of different steps. Okay, so the judge who is protesting, if they are protesting, they should write protest on the ballots, and then the judge who is protesting should be discussing with basically, and the other thing you're going to notice is these steps are basically for a virtual contest or online. So and being that especially in our district, our area and division contests are going to be virtual. Um, you know, these are the steps that should be followed. So the person protesting should discuss the reason why they are protesting. And if you're a judge and you're protesting, you should be familiar with I mean, all of us should be familiar with the rule book. But if you're going so far as to protest it, you should be aware of what the rule book says, especially, and for a lot of reason, I've seen this happen, is the 25% rule. Okay. And after this discussion, if the judge determines they want to proceed with the protest, you should go ahead to the next step. So at that point, all the voting judges, not the tiebreaker, but all the voting judges need to go into a breakout room. And then the ballot counters need to be moved to a different breakout room. And then basically they need to stay there until this process is able to be followed. And if there's any difficulty contacting judges, basically the people running the contest, so the contest chair, Zoom master, editor, they can get a hold of those judges and basically alert them as to they need to be put in this breakout room. And at that point, the chief judge, because again, the chief judge is in charge of these protests, they're going to read from the rule book, basically referencing why the protest is being called upon. And so I have them here, not going to read through them, and again, you'll have this presentation to refer to, but also you should be familiar with the rule book as well. Okay. And then the judges in the breakout room will discuss the protest. The chief judge is to not give their opinion. And then also, it shouldn't matter whether the contestant is in first place or not even, that should have no bearing on it at all. Okay. So then the judges will vote as to whether the protest will stand or not. If it does, then at that point, the contestant needs to be brought into the briefing room. Okay. And if they don't, basically, we'll jump forward a few steps here in a moment. But then at that point, the contestant gets to, I guess you could say, defend, what the infraction is. And that basically the chief judge is the one that runs it. Chief judge will explain the reason for the protest, and then the contestant will respond to the questions. Chief judge also, just don't make sure this doesn't turn into a circus. Okay. Then after that, the contestant leaves the room, and then the judges will decide whether or not that contestant is then disqualified, and it's by majority. And then after that, the judges sorry, it sounded like someone's here at the office. The judges return to the contest room, and and then the ballot counting continues if it wasn't done with, and then the contest chair needs to be made aware of the judge's decision, and as well as the contestant, and that has to happen before the announcement of the winners. And most importantly, that's why I have it bold in red, you cannot announce the disqualification at the end of the contest. Just like you would, and those that are familiar with the announcement of the winners, just like you don't announce if like somebody went over or under on time. You can, in that example, you say there was no time there was no time disqualifications, or there was a time disqualification. Here, you don't see anything about it. Yeah, and then that's pretty much the rest that goes along with that. Like it said, the contest chair notifies contestant decision before the announcement of winners, and then it's basically the same thing. If a contestant brings it up, I have here where I copied it from. You move the ballot counters in a private room, ask them not to leave, same as before. You call the contestant into basically a breakout room to talk to the chief judge, and then it basically goes through very similar to the process that you just saw. And so after the conversation, the contestant will decide who's bringing up the protest, if they still want to lodge a protest. And then if they do, the protesting contestant returns to the contest room, and then basically goes through the same thing. The judges decide whether they're going to go forward with it. If they do, the contestant that is having the protest brought up against them gets to defend themselves as it gets to that point, and then a decision is made. Okay. So two things that I just wanted to bring up in case that people are wondering about them. Public domain. Most of us may know what public domain is, but I just wanted to bring it up here. And what it says is basically in the United States, something is in the public domain when the copyright expires. And it says here, many jokes, stories, or anecdotes have been around a long time. They're known by a lot of people. They are in the public domain, and maybe their sources can't be cited. But it says, however, if a contestant relates one of these stories, jokes, or anecdotes, even though the exact source is not known, the speaker must still acknowledge that it comes from another source. Basically, that it is not their original idea. Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to call out too is one of the questions was, that they'll speak from the same area designated by the contest chair. If a contestant steps out of the designated speaking area, is he or she disqualified for this rule violation? And the answer is no. Judges cannot disqualify the contestant for this rule violation. Because remember, contestants can only be disqualified for eligibility, originality, and timing. However, judges may take this rule violation in consideration and award lower marks for that contestant, because when you read the back of the guide, one of the things talks about basically, and I forget the exact classification of it, but it's basically how they use the stage, movement and that sort of thing. Okay. So, oh, good. See, I didn't go over on time. I was very afraid I was gonna get not even done and it'd be 8 o'clock, but yeah. So I'm sure there's probably some questions, but just before we even take any questions, if there's anything you think of after the fact, or if you're watching the recording and you're not even here live, and you have any questions about anything that was discussed tonight, about the first two sessions, anything having to do with the contest, there's Ari's official Toastmasters email and my official Toastmasters email. So with that, looks like we have 6 minutes left. And I will stay longer, if there are people who have questions that go beyond 8 o'clock, but I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. So with that, are there any questions? I'm actually going to stop sharing. from anything that was brought up or discussed.
Chris, there's one question in the chat
Sure.
from Kelly. Do you collect the tie-breaking judge's ballot at the same time as the other judges?
Yes, we do. Yep. Yeah, and I mean, and it's done that way just so, like, first of all, that we have it, but then also it keeps the confidentiality of the tie-breaking judge, so that, like, we don't have to go back and be like, oh, we have a tie. Oh, we have to go back and find that tie-breaking judge. Just get them all at the same time. And if you pay attention, and again, they're supposed to remain anonymous, but basically, if you're a ballot counter, the way you collect the ballots is you'll see the judges, basically kind of hold their ballot up. Um, but that's if you're a ballot counter, that's how you do collect them. Okay.
And Chris, if I can, I think it's important to note that that tie-breaking judge's ballot is only consulted when the occasion arises that it's needed.
Exactly.
So that it should not be open or disclosed so as not to influence anyone in the process, to maintain fidelity and integrity of that process.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and to build upon that, I'm sure that you guys probably understood that as I was going through all of this, is especially when it comes to judging and the protest, you want to be confidential. A lot of this stuff just has the potential for, if the information gets out, for people to feel bad, for people to, it's just it we want these contests to remain a thing of, I can't think of the word I want. There are these important things that really hold a lot of trust, because there's different things going on. There's different people's opinions and judgments and whatnot. But if we're all doing it correctly, in essence, by the group, we are deciding who was the best, who has had that best speech at that contest. But the details of it, that just is not to be discussed. Um, and if it's a contestant that, they maybe they need some work on their speeches in general, they're going to get feedback during their regular club meetings, but hopefully we're getting the best of the best, and hopefully we see some really good contestants in our speech contest, and especially this contest here. And it looks like, Sue, you have a question.
Yeah, just didn't know if anybody had any ideas. Of course, when people put their ballots straight up, everybody knows who the judges are. And it's sort of like the wink, wink, nod, nod. But especially at our district or our district one, where we're doing hybrid. Our deck has decided everything is hybrid, but that's a different story. But other than giving every single person in the room a ballot and then marking and then having only those people who are judges mark their ballots, we're just trying to come up with possible ideas to keep the judges secrets. We're open. Felicia, my program quality director, we're just sort of thinking of ideas right now.
Well, I mean, so one thing I noticed at the world stage, it was I guess it was the semifinals. I think technically it was the regional semifinals. They sat on the ends, but they weren't maybe like every end chair. So if you really paid attention, you could realize who it is. But honestly, I mean, hopefully, and I mean me included, I tried to, like, not pay attention to that. I didn't really want to know who the judges were. Do you know what I mean? I just I didn't want that sort of knowledge, because if I happen to get into a conversation with somebody that I knew, I just I didn't want it to, I don't know, be on my mind that, oh, this person is a judge, or the reason they're saying this is because they were a judge. I just, I don't know, that's how I am. So why I say that is, maybe by seating them a certain way, that's not super obvious, but at least to like the people who need to know, instead of them going like this, they could just go over and it could be a much more subtle gesture. And how you do that may depend on the room layout or whatever it is. And, you know, and I mean, I was Googling a bunch of stuff as I was putting this together. That was something I did not come across, but I'm sure it's out there. You know, Toastmasters does not dictate that, oh, you have to have judges seated a certain way. But I'm sure that I'm sure that with 120 districts or how many ever there is in the world, somebody has probably figured out like, oh, this is the best way to do it. So food for thought.
And Sue, the anonymity of the judges is to the extent possible. In reality, as Chris mentioned, even at the semifinals and finals, you get to know who the judges are because the ballot counters have to collect.
Mm-hmm.
So do your best and try to pick judges who will be fair, impartial, and maintain integrity.
And the one thing I will say is, as much as there are some people who were like, oh, I got to find out who the judges are, I'd say most people aren't paying attention to that. And maybe the contestants are nervous or thinking about, you know, whatever's going to happen next, you know. So I know sometimes when we're putting stuff together, we think, oh, everybody's paying attention to that. No, there are some people, and like Rhonda said, you just do it to the best of your ability.